Could AEW schedule be hurting their talent? We're going to talk about a report from Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter that kind of shines light into how some talent are feeling after wrestling a few days in a row, given AEW's current schedule. And it's honestly pretty fascinating. Before I get into it, though, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. We're really coming up on 17,000 subscribers, guys, so be sure to smash that like button. Become a part of the Real Take Nation. Okay, let's get to this report. This is, again, from Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. He spoke on in the newsletter this week, and he discussed that AEW schedule, which pretty limited comparatively to New Japan or WWE, who really tour most days out of the week. Well, AEW, you're really only used on TV days, which is maximum really 2 days per week. If you have a pay-per-view, then 3 days a week. That doesn't include, obviously, indies, but we'll talk about indies and how that kind of comes into play in this. But really, you're only working 2 or 3 days a week max if you're AEW. And that's like just if you're like regularly working. If you are, a talent who kind of is a part of the roster but isn't regularly on TV, isn't regularly featured on TV, then, obviously at that point you kind of get maybe a little bit rusty. And this is what Dave kind of hints at in his report. He says the following, quote, he spoke to an unnamed individual, quote, another guy there who ended up working, I think, 3 days in a row after rarely working, brought up how much pain they were in. And this was a guy who had routinely worked a few days in a row for years before AEW and had plenty of 5-show-a-week periods for weeks on end in Japan with a very hard style. He also noted in the Observer that Nick Jackson was an example of a guy whose body has suffered more from working less. And it brings about an interesting conversation because one of the perks, that fans, that wrestlers have touted about All Elite Wrestling has been the fact that if you're a wrestler and you don't want to work 5 days out of the week, you want to be home, you want to, give your body a little more rest than it would regularly get, AEW is probably a better place to be because WWE, unless you're one of the main people on the show like Roman Reigns or Brock Lesnar, who has a contract where you can work only a few days out of the, or work only like a few weeks out of the year. Outside of that, you are going to be wrestling a pretty tough schedule. You're going to be on the road most days out of the week. You're going to be wrestling most days out of the week, given that that WWE has a bunch of house shows. With AEW, like I said before, that isn't the case. So given that kind of schedule, right, given the kind of schedule where you're maybe on a few days and then like a few weeks you don't wrestle, your body is not going to be used to the grind of wrestling multiple days out of the week. So like this is a perfect example of what Dave is talking about. You're wrestling, if you're not wrestling for weeks on end, and then you suddenly come in, it's like, all right, you're going to work Ring of Honor, you're going to work Collision, you're going to work Dynamite the next week. Then at that point, your body kind of says, hey, now we need to, this is a lot, and I'm not used to this. It's kind of like trying to get back into cardio. I would liken it to, again, I'm not a professional wrestler. I'm not going to pretend to know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm just going to talk as a fan, as someone who with a little bit of common sense, right? But if if you're big on cardio and then you suddenly stop and you don't do it for a while, there's going to be a bit of a lag. You're going to not be able to get back into it as easily as you originally thought you would. And professional wrestling is kind of similar, you would think, with, being like, oh man, I'm throwing myself at the ground and this hurts. And you're kind of like, your body kind of isn't as prepared as it would be if you're wrestling 5 days out of the week. On the other hand, right, you have, WWE wrestlers who have routinely complained. A lot of people have routinely complained about the fact that I'm doing too much. So I think in an ideal world, is there that middle ground? Maybe, sure. But, one thing that, wrestlers or wrestling fans, I think, when we talk about, the AEW schedule, we don't really bring up that, you could be a little prone to injury if you're not staying in tune with what you're doing, unless you're like training on those weeks that you're not wrestling, unless you're like literally taking bumps in the ring those weeks that you're not wrestling. That could have a detrimental effect. And I'm not going to say that specific people have not been wrestling or specific people have not been active outside of the ring or when they're not featured in matches, I should say. But AEW recently has gone on a string of injuries. There have been quite a few like pretty serious injuries in AEW. Some of them obviously related to bumps taken in the ring. Some of them we aren't as sure about. But yeah, this is a very interesting point. I'm not going to propose a solution. I'm not going to pretend like I have a solution to this. But I don't know. It's something to keep in mind because as we continue these conversations, because we're heading up to 2024, which is going to be arguably the biggest year in free agency, in wrestling free agency, I should say, since 1996. You have some premium contracts coming up that we know of in Drew McIntyre. Look at me, I'm in a little indie mark. Drew McIntyre and Becky Lynch. There's a potential maybe for Ricky Starks. We're hearing, so maybe jump ship. And he's someone who has ties in WWE, not just Cody, but others as well. And he's a premium talent. So it's interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see where the cards land and kind of like what talent prioritize and how this specifically plays a part into whatever is going to happen in 2024. And I know I didn't mention MJF. That is because I'm of the personal opinion that MJF has already re-signed. I think that the bidding war of 2024 is mostly just the story at this point, if they even go back to it. But we'll see what happens. Again, a lot of interesting stuff out of the world of professional wrestling. We're going to keep you tuned in as much as we possibly can. Of course, I'm sorry we have not been dropping as many videos as I probably should have over the past few weeks, or especially this past week. Part of that is due to personal things that are happening. So I appreciate you all being patient with me. Go over and subscribe to youtube.com/WrestleVibes, by the way, new channel for youtube.com/WrestleVibes. We're doing a soft launch there. So go over there. They've got some great not long form, but like more produced content, I should say, over there. Hoping to have some more long form content over there as well. But a lot of fun stuff in the world of pro wrestling. If you guys haven't already done so, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And of course, my heart goes out to everyone across the world who is dealing with oppression and just I wish that we can stop the senseless death that is happening throughout the world, whether it's anywhere. Just that's all I'm going to say at this moment. But really praying for everyone. Guys, hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Keep it real.